You are now listening to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. We preserve the history and sport of hunting through curious conversation and action-packed hunts, as well as offering you tips and strategy for more successful hunts. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. This is episode number 137. Just like I do every week, I'm going to say today I'm joined by, but no one's shocked when I say this, but Mr. Jake Gaylord is on the podcast today. I'm not going to say how's it going or what are you doing because you'll scald me, but
thank you.
Maybe just tell the people a little bit about why you're an enemy of Sonic now and you're taking them to the cleaners.
So if you're not from Oklahoma, you don't know about Sonic, I guess, but
Northern Texas too.
Yeah, Northern Texas, but Sonic is like one of the cornerstones of Oklahoma, or used to be, at least for my little small town.
They're dead to you.
Yeah. I guess either people don't like working for $7.25 an hour now, or I don't know what's changed, but now they have like 3 workers. And Christian and I decided to hop on a pod, and it was supposed to be like 6:30. I live like maybe 2 miles from Sonic. And I was like, okay, little 10-minute drive there, just order a few drinks and then head home. Well, the people in front, if you're one of these people, piss off. And I mean that disrespectfully. If you're one of those people that goes through a drive-through, like at a Sonic or something, and orders a full meal for you and your family and 5 cousins, just pull in a stall, dude. Pull in a stall. Because me and Abby went there and we got 2 drinks, and it took like 25 minutes of sitting in line. Granted, they only had 3 workers, and I'm not going to go into that whole spiel about hair color or anything. But yeah, there's that. And yeah, so I was in a good mood, but now, we're starting an hour late, so it's fine.
Yeah, no biggie. So the topic for today, so just had a recent trip to the taxidermist and officially got my first Pope and Young buck. So what we're going to talk about this podcast is that buck, a little bit about the background of the Pope and Young scoring system, and then we're going to talk through some Q&A because we got a lot of good questions from you guys from Instagram. Jake, you beat me to this probably by like, what was it, 2 years ago that you shot the booner now? 2020?
Not a booner, high 150s.
Okay. Nickname is the booner. We're not calling the buck the booner.
Okay.
Yeah. So Jake got to knock out his first like Cy Curtis and Pope and Young all in one, which is really nice. But it took me a few more years to get my first official Pope and Young, and on a 7.5-year-old buck. So I was pumped up about that. But I think this buck is a great example of why some people get really flustered with the scoring system because of gross and net score. You did a TikTok about this. I think it was a while back, but can you talk a little bit about the Pope and Young or just the scoring system in general and gross and net, the difference between the two?
Yeah, but I don't want people thinking I know this, so take it with a grain of salt. But from what I remember, because it has been a minute since I've looked into this, the way the scoring system works is nets are for fish. No, but in all honesty, gross is basically for the deer hunter, and the nets are basically for the state. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say your deer. Have you ever said the gross score or?
No. So I shot the 6x7 last. I almost said last summer.
I just didn't want to like say your buck scored this when you didn't officially .
So the 6x7 that I shot last October, so October 1st, opening day in Oklahoma. That deer ended up grossing 142 and 7/8, and then ended up netting officially as a typical 125 and 2/8. So about 17 inches of difference between those two scores. And a lot of folks that are maybe new to the podcast or don't really give a frick about scoring are going to say, what are those two numbers and kind of why do they matter? So we did want to take just a few minutes to talk through that as we talk about this buck.
Yeah. So like I just said, a good example of that would be Christian's buck, right? Like it grossed 142, and so like the net that's for the state, and because it netted, what'd you say, 125?
Yeah, exactly.
So the way they break that down is how I recall. I mean, it could be right. I think it's right. So if you don't believe me, look it up.
Do your own research.
Yeah, but from what I've gathered, it is like, so when Pope and Young was founded, they basically founded it to, I don't know if it was Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett. I think it was Boone and Crockett that like everything was going extinct and stuff like that, because like there wasn't any regulation about hunting or anything like that. Yeah, so basically the example I was getting at is Christian's buck. It grossed 142 and netted 125. Well, it grossed 142, and so like that's what a lot of people like say, communicate like, oh, what'd your deer score? They're not going to be like gross 142. They're just usually going to say, oh, it scored 142. And the reason that is A, because it sounds better, obviously. And then B, it's like gross is for the hunter, right? The net is kind of for the state, because I'm pretty sure when Pope and Young first started out, they were trying to figure out like how to measure whether or not like an area is good for whitetail habitat, right? Or just any big game animal in general. And so when they do that, it's just like, yeah, the buck did put on this amount, like 142 inches, but it wasn't symmetrical. And so that's how they kind of like tell whether the area is healthy or not, is how symmetrical the horns are. Because you could say, oh, well, one side of this buck I shot, was like a perfect 10. And then the other side was like, had like a turkey foot, weird thing with, a few flyers and stuff. And it's just like, well, that isn't probably going to be an impressive amount of inches that the buck had or the buck grew, but that thing probably get hit by a car, or it probably got shot at. And while it might be a healthy environment, like it has plenty of food, plenty of cover and all that stuff, is that really a healthy environment if it gets hit by a car? If it gets shot at by another hunter, like how healthy is that? And so like that's just, I think of what I gathered is like how they measure that. And so when they see a nice, beautiful, typical, that's kind of the like factor of, hey, like this thing doesn't have a funky side. And, I mean, granted, it could have funky genetics where it has kickers everywhere, kind of like Justin's buck this year on public and stuff. Like that thing ain't getting hit by a car.
No.
Probably not getting shot at even. But no. I mean, you have those crazy anomalies like that. But yeah, for the most part, that's kind of it. And now with, I think, hunting being like where it's at today, is like almost everything seems so, I don't want to say like, it seems like there's roads everywhere, there's people everywhere, like you can't get away from people. It almost feels like you kind of need to change up the scoring system, possibly. And I know that sounds kind of ridiculous because it's been around for so long, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to like tell for those like high point deer. What I mean by that is like your deer has what, like 13 points, right? And so like I think the average person's used to seeing like 8-pointers. Like those are the most common deer around, just a nice mainframe 8. And it's just hard. It's hard to realize that because your deer looks really symmetrical, right? Like it's a 6x7, right? So yep. Like when you just sit there and just look at it head on, it doesn't look 17 inches off of each side or anything like that. But I guess when you just really, I mean, I guess you kind of have to look at it on paper, like, okay, this time's, 7/8, longer than this one. And then this space is a whole inch wider than this one. And it's just like, the more points you have, obviously, the more
deductions you're going to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And it's just weird.
It is weird. And one thing that I found really weird through, and by the way, for the people that are listening, we never really grew up interested in scoring deer or submitting deer to the book. So all this kind of stuff is kind of new to me. Like I've got friends that have 10 Pope and Young sitting in their house that there's none of them that have been sent off. There's none of them that have been entered in a record book. So we're kind of feeling out this process as we're going, especially since we're bow hunting. It's like, I'm trying to honor the animal by putting it in a record book and getting a plaque. And like, I want to put it under it because like that's what that deer grew. But anyways, it's interesting to me looking at the different scoring systems too, because for instance, on one thing I learned through talking with Jared, our taxidermist, was for a buck on a Pope and Young scale to be scored as a non-typical has to have 16 inches or greater of abnormal points. And that's like a weird cutoff because my Uncle Justin's deer he shot was a 16 point, right? It had 13 inches of extras. And that deer wasn't even considered a non-typical by Pope and Young.
Would that thing gross
why
again?
is that? It grossed 165 and some change. And as a typical, it netted 129. So it barely made the book for Pope and Young. But in Cy Curtis, it netted 155 as a non-typical.
And explain that. I know because you got to explain it to me, so I'm sure there's a few out there that haven't.
Yeah. So basically, the way that you score a non-typical buck is you take his typical rack and you score it, right? And you take all of the abnormal points and you just add them onto the net typical score, and that's your net non-typical score because they don't get deducted, right? You don't have to compare them side to side.
But that's weird. It works on Cy Curtis, and then it doesn't work for Pope and Young. But I think Cy Curtis is like only an Oklahoma-based thing, correct?
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. But it's interesting because Pope and Young, it's such a broadly used term and club. It's all across the U.S. that a deer would have to grow 16 inches of non-typical point for it to be considered a non-typical. And it's just like you look at Justin's buck with triple flyers on each side, and you're like, that's a non-typical. What does it need to be one? And so I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. The scoring system for deer is interesting. And I think one of the messages that I would want to get off to people is because it seems like we live in a world that is very, very focused around scoring right now with deer. And a lot of folks might, get their deer officially scored and it might gross 132 and it ends up netting 120 and it's not in the book.
I'm telling you one thing. If you're really into scoring, you probably want to unsubscribe and stuff because next year some 120s are going to die.
That's true.
I can promise you that because I'm about tired of like worrying about that crap.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of falls in with the message, right? Is like, it doesn't take anything away from the deer if it doesn't net high, right? Like another good example of this is Jordan Schaffler shot a buck and it scored like, I think low 150s. It was like a 15 point or something. It had a bunch of extra points and it netted like 116. Does that mean does that mean that deer is not a 150s deer? No, that's not what that means at all. It means it didn't net for that scoring system. Right?
We were talking about that earlier. Not Jordan's deer, but I texted you because Justin's deer outscored mine and we hunt the same area. And I was like, this means I'm still the big dog since his only netted, like 129.
155. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, no, that's like saying, that's what you said. You said, no, if I shoot a 190 and it scores like 140 net, he said, no, absolutely not.
I'm still the big, that's what I said. Yeah. So I don't know. Scoring's cool. Like I did want to preamble about that a little bit on this podcast. Scoring is super cool. I'm happy to have my first official Pope and Young. And I think I actually have one on the wall that's going to be a Pope and Young too, that I never had scored from 2019. So, but
the thing on that is if you don't know, like if you think it's going to be close, our thing is like, we don't want to waste like our taxidermist time on like scoring something that really wouldn't, like really wouldn't make a difference. Like could it net 125? Maybe, but if it's going to be like a chin hair to get it in, then it's just like, it's probably not worth this time.
Well, if I would have known that about my 6x7 would have been 125 and 2/8, I might have been like, it's fine. I remember texting him though. I was like, man, this deer will surely make the book. And then he messaged me back. He's like, he made it by 2/8. I was like, what?
Yeah, that is one thing that like is pretty cool whenever like we have him score some is your scoring is really not off from like the rough tailgate score that we do like right after, or basically before we even gut the deer. We usually throw it on tailgate and you usually rough score it and your record's been pretty good.
Yeah, so we scored your deer. I know we added up the main beams wrong when we scored your deer. I don't know how, but we were like 4 or 5 inches off on that. Justin's buck, we rough scored it at 169. It was 165 and change. So there was 3.5 or 4 inches off on that. And then my buck, the 6x7, we rough scored it at 144 and something, and it was 142 and 7/8. So we were less than 2 inches off on that deer. And so it's like, with a flimsy tape measure and another guy trying to hold the deer's head up, in the tailgate, that's not bad. That's what I always say when we score them on the tailgate. It's like plus or minus 5. It could be 5 inches smaller. Literally. It could be 5 inches bigger. You just got to give it that range. But when you think about it, and when you're talking about hundreds of inches, plus or minus 5 is not bad. I'll take that. I'll take that every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So scoring's cool, but it's not something I think we have focused on it a little bit. I focused on wanting to kill deer of a certain caliber of the last few years, and I think I'm going to do away with that on public land for sure.
Public for sure. Private, I mean, I know we've already talked about this off pod, but private kind of still trying to hold true, but public, man,
fair game, baby.
If you have 2 tags, well, what's that Chris Stapleton song? Something about firing away. But if you only have 1 tag, and if it's like early, I don't know, not even if it's early in the Oklahoma trip, but I don't know. It's always a fly by the seat of your pants. Basically, if it gets you excited, send it.
Yeah. Well, scoring's cool. Don't beat yourself up about it. And I will always say this: if a 130-inch 8-pointer walks by me, I'm not going to be like, well, let me look at that right G2. Let me look at that left G2.
I really wish he was 3 inches bigger.
Yeah, I know. I know. Exactly. No, that's something that it's fun.
The majority of the time, though, think about the bucks we passed, and I guarantee you, if we would have said, put it into perspective, that perspective, saying, what if that deer was 5 inches bigger? Would we have shot it? Probably. But so are you saying 5 inches on something that give or take 5 inches when it's in the back of the bed scoring? You're like, could be this. Either way, I'm happy. So Why not do that from the tree? You know what I mean?
Yes, that's what I'm saying with the hunter satisfaction. People are like, oh, I want to shoot a 130 this year. They go shoot one that's 127. Like, man, I'm disappointed. I'm like, why?
It's 3
Why
inches,
are you disappointed?
I mean, hey, from a guy's standpoint, 3 inches is a lot. That's all I want to say.
Is this a lot?
Hey, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, but you get the point. I mean, shoot deer. Shoot what makes you happy. Scoring's cool, but I don't think it's something worth fixating your whole season on.
I guarantee you, half those booners that you see on YouTube are probably high 150s deer.
So I don't know if you did steal that from Dallas Barber or not.
I did. I was hoping that would bring you into that.
Yeah. So Dallas Barber's the ODWC big game biologist, and Jake did a video about how rare Boone and Crockett deer are, and he posted Dallas commented on it. He was like, actual net booners. He was like, I've scored thousands of deer and I've scored 5 net booners. And he was like, and all those TV shows that shoot a booner every year means they shoot a 150s. And I was like, man, that's true. And
I mean,
why does it matter? Why you got to say a 150 is a booner? Nobody cares.
Yeah. You would think that maybe the turnaround on the production, isn't that slow, but you would think they could officially have it at least green scored before they release the video. I mean, I know Booner in the title probably gets a lot more views, but
it probably does. Yeah, that's very true. I think we beat the horse dead enough on the scoring. Ready to get into some Q&A?
I reckon. We
got a lot of folks that were sending in questions from Instagram, so I really appreciate that. The Hunter's Advantage podcast is powered by Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb is a family-owned company based right here in Oklahoma that makes tree stands, saddle platforms, climbing sticks, and so much more.
Christian, I have a quick question.
What's that?
What bites sound harder, a hippo or an alligator?
No idea.
It's a trick question. The Ridge Runner 2.0 bites harder than both of them. But all jokes aside, we use these products all across the land on public or private. These help us get into any tree we want and hunt where the deer actually are.
Most men go to the grocery store for their meat, but these products help you go to God's grocery store. I have used the Out on a Limb Ridge Runner 2.0 and the Shakar sticks for the last few years hunting public land bucks, and I've actually shot several bucks out of this setup. If you want to support the podcast and get some Out on a Limb equipment, make sure to go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast. I'll start with the first one.
Are we just doing the Instagram?
Yeah, we'll just do the Instagram for this podcast, and then we'll move over to some of the TikTok, some of the Facebook, and some of the email questions for the next podcast that we'll do. So this one, first question from Instagram comes from Brett_Swafford. Hope I said that right. He said, how do you pick where to put your feeders, and do you always hang a stand close by? What do you got, Jake?
Let me look. I'm more of a visual guy.
Someone audibly reads it to you and you're like,
ugh. Yeah, literally. So where to position the feeders, I would say, from my experience, I have 2 feeders. One's out in the field, and then another one is like maybe 50, 60 yards into a little thicket of timber. And from my experience, I have seen that there's more consistent daylight movement from bucks inside the timber on that camera, on that feeder, rather than out in the middle of a field. And this could be different with other areas, like the difference between my private hunting spot and your private hunting spot, Christian, is probably neighbors, right? So the deer around my private is probably a lot more skittish than it would be on yours. And so it kind of makes sense that, hey, they're probably, especially the bucks, probably are more timid to use the field, at least in the daytime, rather than inside the timber. And I've seen that firsthand. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get a lot of nocturnal buck picks out in the field, but that's nocturnal. And unless you're have a really good spotlight, I mean,
or you're a wildlife photographer, it doesn't help you any.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was thinking about this. The one, it's going to have to be someplace. If you plan on hunting, it was a 2-part question. So he asked like where you put the feeders, and then where do you always hang a stand close by? I'm not putting a feeder out just for craps and giggles myself. You know, some people might say, man, I just want the deer to be super healthy and I want a supplemental feed. Not me. When I put out a feeder, I want to kill the deer. So that's my only reason for putting it out.
But that's the way some people are. Like some people will put a feeder out and then hang their stand like 80 yards away and like try to get them coming into the feeder.
You definitely could do that. And what I would say on my feeders is, one, I try to think about the access. Like when you introduce feeders into hunting, it creates some access issues. One, when you're showing up to get into the stands in the mornings, there's usually deer on the feeders, right? Especially in early season when it's hotter and those deer are trying to feed when it's still cool at night. And 2, in the evenings when you're sitting on those feeders, it's very hard to get out of the stand sometimes without scaring the deer off. So the short answer is yes, I usually hang a stand nearby my feeders because my goal is to kill the deer, not watch them. But as far as picking where to put them, I try to put them as close to bedding areas as I can, because I don't want to ask too much of the deer, right? Like let's say our feeder's 500 yards away from the bedding area. Well, on 80% of the days of the year, it's probably not going to be super cold where they're going to want to travel that far in the daylight to feed. So I try to put it as close to the bedding as I possibly can without intruding on it, and where I can still get good access on the right wind directions. And
I second that.
Yeah, because you want it to be close enough where you're not asking the deer to do too much, but also far away enough where you're not intruding. And that's going to be different for every property, right? Like,
but regardless, they're probably going to try to eat the corn. Like corn's the magical fruit. Like, it has the juice. So they're going to be hitting it, but that's just the difference in whether they hit it 30 minutes after shooting light or 30 minutes before.
Yeah. That's kind of the meta point there, I think. As close as you can get to the bedding without intruding on it. And yes, I am always hanging a stand nearby, but Brett might have a completely different property, right? He might have a huge winter wheat field that he's hunting, and he wants to put his feeder 200 yards past him and catch the deer as they're running by him, and presenting a shot opportunity like that. So it's going to be different for everybody, but on our properties where we don't have big ag, we don't have a lot of food, I hunt over the feeders. That's just my personal preference.
Yep. All right. The next one's by Jake Ordner. What tips you got? Yeah. What tips you guys could give on shed hunting? What do you got?
Shed hunting. Dude. So
walk a lot.
What's funny is there's like two things that people consistently ask that I'm just like, dude, we have nothing for you. The two things are, one, like whitetail habitat management, and two, shed hunting. One, we don't have properties that we can change a lot because we don't own any property. And secondly, we like to go scout for deer postseason and hopefully step on a shed that goes through the rubber boot. And that's kind of how we find them. I don't really have a super trained eye for sheds, and usually don't have the time to get away to shed hunt as much as I would like. So, but what I can say with my limited experience shed hunting is I'm going exactly where the deer are spending most of their time. So this is my one time a year where I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk out this bedding area, hopefully not mess it up too much. Travel corridors in between bedding and food. That's a great place. But what I notice every year with sheds is like people find them in the weirdest places. Like I saw Cole Owen today. He had a shed in between like a forked tree, like a deer had dropped it in between a tree. And I was like, how can you give a tip about, well, make sure you're looking between trees? No, I'm very much with the miles for piles, guys. That's how you found sheds in my mind.
Yep. I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mean, you've already covered.
What do you mean? You're not a shed guru?
No. Plus, I think there's a couple more questions about sheds too. So
okay,
I'll save what I have for those.
Okay, sounds good. Biggest misconceptions about public land and private land hunting. This comes from T Pritch 30. That's very broad. That can mean a lot of things. But
yeah. So well before the season, I would say there was more hunting pressure on private than there was on public. But in Kansas this year in November, that proved to be wrong. Kansas early late season was like super good. Like there was that it was basically like having a whole weehaw and stuff to yourself, like hundreds of acres basically to yourself over soybeans and all that crap. But when November hit, it was a war zone, literally World War III. So my go-to previous years would have said, there's not that much pressure, but then again, it's, I guess, kind of when you go and where you go. So other than that, I can't really think of any on top of my head.
Biggest misconceptions is that it's super easy to kill a big buck on private. And then two, it's super hard to kill a good buck on public. Like you said, I think it's just the time of year and your unique situation. I have hunted private pieces that are 10 times harder to kill a good buck on than decent public in Kansas, and vice versa. Sometimes it's been fairly easy to shoot, just like we talked about, 125 incher on public land in Kansas. I've seen better deer on public land in Kansas than I had in 90% of my hunting growing up. I'm being completely honest. So it is so spot dependent. People think, oh, you got private land, you got to kill a good one every year. Maybe not. Like you said, sometimes you got more competition on private than you do public. You ever arm wrestled your brother for a deer blind? That's how it goes for me. So there's some misconceptions.
Yep.
All right, I got the next one. Connor Swab, Whitetail Mission brother, says.
Wait, no, this one's me.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead.
Anyways, Connor Schwab from Whitetail Missions. What's the dream out of state trip if you only had 1 week? The state and then the date.
Oh man, dude, this one's too hard.
I thought about this one.
I think if I had for whitetail, we're talking specifically for whitetail. I think any sober-minded individual would say Iowa for a week, right?
Right.
And if I had to go, let's just say I had private land, I would say November 3 through 10. That would be my days that I would pick, just because big bucks are on their feet, and I think in that early to pre-rut or stage, that's my favorite time to try to kill a big buck.
Okay, so I guess I'll go whitetail now since.
Were you gonna go something else?
I was gonna go something else. Yeah. Okay, so my dream state would be Alaska, and then on the species, I literally was like, I don't care. Like, it could be a moose, it could be for trout fishing or whatever. I wouldn't care, but I just want to go to Alaska and like date anytime, drop me off. Unless it's during the winter, then I'd feel like I'd really be hurting. But I don't know. But for whitetail, I would say like one of the Midwest states for sure. Like whether that be Iowa, like you were talking about, or I didn't really think about states like that. But I would go early. I wouldn't go during the rut just because Kansas ruined it.
Yeah, but let's just say hypothetically, like you had a great private farm and you had to pick like your best day.
I mean,
no pressure.
I would pick like sometime during November, but if it's probably not going to be on private, so that's where
that's true.
I would go early. I would go early rather than late. And the only reason is I think you'd have less opportunity, like equal opportunity of not running into people, whether it be early season or late season. But late season, it's probably pretty cold. Then early season, you could probably see just as many deer, but it also be t-shirt weather. So
can't beat that. All right. We got a question from Marshfield Outdoors. He said, podcast episode swap ? I think Marshfield either has been doing a podcast or he's just started a podcast. He said swap. Have we done any podcast episode swaps in the past?
Well, we take Venmo and
Zelle.
No, I don't think we swapped. There was one other guy that was wanting to, I think, do collab, I think is what he called it. And
yeah.
But no, I don't think we've done one like that, at least.
So we're trying to do our podcast this year in series and keep it super specific to kind of a flow and just topically. So Marshfield, send us maybe a potential topic that you'd want to discuss, and maybe we can see how that would fall into our series. And always, we're always happy to get on other people's podcasts and talk. I remember when I started this podcast, my second guest was Jordan Harbison of Mountain Ops. And I was like, dude, why are you on my podcast right now? There was no reason he should have got on my podcast. I'm not saying that is this situation at all.
No, we're not. We're not that tier.
Yeah. But I'm very happy to get on anybody's podcast. And if we can find something that topically lines up between us, yeah, we'd be happy to do it.
Why would they want to talk to us? Like,
dude, why they want to talk to me?
If they've listened for at least like 3 podcasts, you'd be like, these guys don't know a damn thing.
I don't know.
We just like talking about it, so it's fine.
That's right. What do we got next?
Hudson Outdoors. How do you know when to leave or stay when it comes to pressure on public land? I think this Hudson, is that not the same guy that killed that tank in Missouri?
It might be.
I think it is.
Oh yeah, I think that might be.
Name, but I ain't gonna touch my phone right now.
Yeah. Man, how to know when to leave or how to know when to stay when it comes to pressure on public land. I'll say every man has his breaking point. What are you gonna say?
Yeah, let me hold on. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say every man has his breaking point. My my gauge for deciding when to leave or when to stay is typically when the number of people that I have walked up on or slash been walked up on exceeds the number of deer. So if in a 2-day period of time I've been walked up on 5 or 6 or 7 times and I've seen one deer, that usually shows me, especially if I'm hunting a fantastic time of the year like November, that I am being blunted by the pressure of the people, and
Mhm.
it's time to go try something else. That's usually my measuring stick.
So that's a good point. There's two types of pressure though. There's the pressure that you think people has been hunting this spot, and so you don't know. And then there's like, hey, I see a headlight walking to my tree, and like there's a headlight flashing at me from like 75 yards away.
Yep.
And how you can tell if people's not flashing your headlight, but you're like kind of like, I think someone's been hunting this. That happened to me last year on Oklahoma Public. I found out people was hunting this area from the toilet paper trails that was down this pretty like it was a brush hog little path, and there was just like white toilet paper trails. Like obviously I didn't get too close to
You
it.
sure it wasn't Carol?
It might have been Carol. I asked him. I did ask him. I was like, "Hey, you been back there?" And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, I seen toilet paper." And he was like, "Did you see poop on it?" And I was like, "No." Then it wasn't me. He was like, "You would know." And I was like, "Okay."
You know if it was me. That's funny. So that's how you gauge it, is if there's toilet paper.
I mean, that type of human sign, like, oh, is there flagging tape? But in Kansas, I seen flagging tape all over the place, dude. Like it was everywhere. And I was like, that could be 15 years old or it could be 5 days old. I don't know. So yeah, just that type. I guess like go with your gut. Like if you're like, man, I think there's people hunting this. I'm not seeing all that much like action and stuff, and you should go with your gut.
Here's one thing to consider though. Like it is kind of super dependent on what your backup plan is. So if you've kind of put all your eggs in this one basket and somebody has walked in camo clothing and, topped or flipped your Easter basket on top of you and all the eggs have fallen out, if you don't have a good backup option, you might be very tempted to stay in a spot that you know is not going to work. Like, let's just be honest. A big mature buck, apart from being an idiot in the rut, is going to respond to human intrusion in a negative way and quit frequenting areas where there's lots of people. So if there is lots of people, yes, there are ways to kind of get around that or maybe hunt places other people aren't. But to some extent, there's going to be people. If there's people in a spot and they're running it, they're running it. And I would rather go to a spot that I have never been to before and roll the dice on a place that I know for sure is probably not going to produce something because of the intrusion.
Dude, I agree, but you told me about how on Rattlesnake there was like all those people. I mean, we tried to set there in 2021 and there was people, and then I tried to set there last year just this last season, and I got walked up on by that older guy.
Yeah.
And then 7 days later, Justin sits in that same general area and sees what he said was a 150.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what's happening,
There's never a perfect scenario, right? Like, and like we just talked about, like, let's say there is 4 guys coming on you every side. You still might kill a big one.
Yeah.
You might.
But that property is kind of different. We're not going to get like too much into why it's different, but to a certain like it hunts different. I guess that's what we can say. So like your area, I mean, I guess Missouri would kind of be relatively like possibly the same.
I'd say it's more like Northeast Oklahoma or Kansas.
Most of Missouri, you think?
Probably. Yeah. Ozarks are a big ag.
Yeah.
One of the two. So
maybe not. I don't know.
Like you said, though, I think going with your guts is probably
because it could happen. Like you just don't know, especially on public. Like you don't know who's walking around where, and I think that's why sometimes I get flustered in the tree sometimes, because like it doesn't make sense, and like I don't know if it's supposed to make sense in a way, because like you could be doing everything right, and then someone else come walking through and screw everything up, or you could be doing everything wrong, and then someone happens to get out of their stand early or something like that and bumps a giant your way, and it just comes strolling past. And you're like, I'm a freaking genius. I know everything. When in reality, that deer just got pushed to you. And so, it's crazy.
It's the fun. It's the highs and lows. It's the thrill and the agony of public land. You do not know. You're introducing a variable that's completely uncontrollable. Like you said, you might be sitting in your tree and here comes a 200 incher because Billy Bob Joe was chasing him with a recurve, on the ground. You just don't know. Yeah. You just don't know. That's kind of what makes it so special when you kill a good one on public. You're like, I've defied the odds.
You did something. Yeah.
It's very special. So you'll know though. Sometimes you just get fed up and you're like, I'd rather go sit somewhere and not see people and see 0 deer. Yeah. There's nothing worse than seeing 0 deer and people.
Kansas, what?
Yeah.
All right. Do you have it?
Yeah. He asked another question. Hudson Outdoors asked another question. He said, what states are you guys hunting next year?
So definitely Oklahoma. That's a given. We have lifetimes here.
What?
So yeah, crazy. I know. I would really like to hunt Kansas because there's a little bit of vengeance, and I feel like we could really get it done.
Vengeance is mine, says the Lord.
Yes. And I know everybody thinks this every year, but Kansas opens up early, as we all know. And if we can draw out again, I think we can get it done early, and therefore we can either A, spend more time on Oklahoma public, or B, branch out and maybe towards Missouri, because I heard we got a little offer up on that.
Yeah, might have a little collaboration opportunity. Oh, sorry, my microphone. I'm wondering how the odds will be in Kansas. We drew out for a fairly popular unit last year, so it was like, okay, I'm not super surprised. But this year, if we do something similar, I don't know if we'll draw it or not. It'll be very dependent on if we draw it in Kansas. But if we don't draw it in Kansas, like, I'm all for learning something close. So Missouri, or heck, even a Nebraska trip would get me kind of hyped up.
Nebraska, you've been on that train ever since you went from Muley.
I like Nebraska. I just like the idea of a 300-pound whitetail with a big rack. That's kind of exciting. Yeah. So maybe one of those three. Oklahoma's definitely a given, but maybe Nebraska, maybe Kansas, maybe Missouri. We'll just see.
I think Missouri would be a good one because, I mean, y'all can tell us if we're wrong, but I think it's like $225 or $250 for 2 buck tags.
It's very friendly for over the counter.
Yeah. So
for us broke folk, it is very nice.
I don't know. It's looking pretty tempting. Plus, I mean, if you, shameless plug, I guess here, like the Hudson Outdoors who asked this question, if y'all haven't seen his video of him shooting a absolute toad on Missouri public lands, go check it out because I forget exactly.
Drop or just a regular drop?
I know it has a drop. I don't know if it's a double or not. I don't have the picture pulled up here, but definitely look at it. Like it's a really cool hunt.
Sweet video. Yeah. I think you're up.
This is from Jess HW11. How did you all get started, and how do you all know each other?
It's a good one.
Did he mean how did you get started hunting, or how did you get started filming and stuff?
Probably how HA got started. I assume that's what he's talking about. Okay. So I'll start with the reverse. How did we know each other? When did we meet? Like what? 4th grade?
It was on the bus in like 3rd or 4th grade.
Okay. Yeah. I just am so bad with ages now. I'm like, yeah, 3rd grade. I was what, like 14? And they're like, no, bro, you were 8. I was like, 8.
You were a freshman, 14, son.
Yeah. So, gosh, how old is that? 8 years old?
They can do the math. It's fine.
Yeah, y'all look it up. You have Google. Yeah, so we met, 7 or 8 years old on the bus. I rode the bus. Jake rode the bus. At that time, I sat in the front of the bus because a young man doesn't want to get bullied. And then Jake had rode the bus. You'd already rode the bus for like years. And so Jake's like,
I grew up on that bus.
Jake was like, come sit in the back of the bus. I'm like, dude, I only bad things
Come to the
happen
dark
back
side.
in the bus. That's when people are like shooting people in the back of the legs with pin guns and like steel tipped. What are those called? Are they called hornets when you get a rubber band?
Dude, yes. So if y'all don't know what a hornet is, it's where you like. This is back of bus shenanigans. Today's kids would not know about this because they're too busy on their phones. But that's where you get a piece of paper and you roll it up like hot dog style.
So thick.
It's really, really thick. And then it's basically a handle. You get a rubber band and you like pinch it around the rubber band and pull back and fling it almost like a slingshot. And you want to talk about it like a whelp, dude. To get
So
you
bad.
going. Yeah. Anyways. I think, that's where we met, but we weren't always into hunting. I don't think we were into hunting at all at that point.
Probably fishing.
It was fishing.
Probably fishing at that point. Yeah. Yeah. We made pin guns on the bus too. Basically you take the tube out of a pin, you take the ink cartridge, you tie a rubber band around it, and then you use the rubber band to shoot the ink cartridge. I swear.
I remember this still.
Did you have a particular story?
I mean, no, continue. Or is that all you were going to say?
No, I was going to say that there was like several instances where I saw ink cartridges like going at the bus driver's the back of his head, and they would like hit the mirror. They would like, not me either, but they would hit the mirror and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to stop the bus." Like dude, you could fire him from the back of the bus. I'm talking hit the front.
I remember this one time. Because I was never the best at making them, because what you had to do is you had to like get a rubber band, break it, and then like tie each end around like the outer casing of the pin, right? And so I was never good with knots. Like I'd always just try to do the regular like tie your shoe knot, but then like thread the laces through where it'll tie a knot. So I could never get the rubber band to stick. And so when I actually did tie a good knot somehow, some way, I always like tied it too far up the pin or too down, which would like. Long story short, whichever one you did, if you tied it too far back, that little ink cartridge wouldn't have enough velocity to like really do any damage after it left the barrel, basically. So, God, I sound like a little heathen right now.
It's all right.
But I made one really good one time, like tied it perfectly. And I remember I was sitting next to you. You were inside the window. And I was like, look at this one I made. And
pulling out like a weapons dealer.
Yeah.
Check this out.
You said, does it shoot hard? And I said, yeah. I don't know why you said it. You said, here, shoot my leg. I swear to God. You said, here, shoot my leg, and like kind of stuck up your calf a little bit. And I went from like 3 inches away. I forgot about this. I shot it into your calf, and the ink cartridge stuck in like maybe a quarter of an inch, but it was enough to like stick into it.
Oh, it was sticking in there.
Yeah, and you're like, just like, oh my God.
It hurts. I remember looking at it. I'm like, I can't see the tip anymore.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh, I don't know why I let you. I don't know why I let you shoot me with that.
Hey, we weren't the smartest.
That was one story, and I also know shortly thereafter everyone started doing the hornets on the bus, that rubber bands got banned from school. You can no longer have them around your wrist because kids were going up from like long range, hitting people in the legs. It was just a different time. Like you weren't on TikTok
had like
at
searches
school.
in English one time, like
for rubber bands. Everyone showed me your wrists. Bands.
There was that, and then like this one teacher made us empty out our pockets because like she thought we had rubber bands, and I was like, listen, I have like 3 erasers and wadded up piece of paper that I was going to make into a hornet on the bus.
Oh, that was good times. So that's the context. That's how me and Jake met. And then from an HA perspective, we had tried something similar a couple times. So that maybe this is encouraging for some folks. We tried, so just like everybody else that produces any kind of content for the internet, we were like, dude, we should make hunting videos and get sponsors, and one day we'll get paid to hunt for a living. That's kind of what I thought.
Oh yeah,
it'll be all over. So we tried to make a few of those pages, like everybody starts an Instagram, and then you have somebody that like can like make a t-shirt. So I've been a part of we did what was first? We did
Through the Peep
Through the
Outdoors.
Peep Outdoors. Yeah. So that whole idea of that premise was the premise of that idea was like,
These are all trademarked, by the way. So if
yeah,
y'all
don't
try to
try
steal
these.
these names, piss
We
off.
still own these. Yeah, Through the Peep Outdoors. And the idea of that was like just showing bow hunting. Like you live in bow hunting, you live life like through the peep. You know, that's like your portal to killing animals. So I thought that was a cool play on words. It never really
Very
worked.
philosophical.
Yes. And then we rebranded from Through the Peep. We tried another one called 918 Media. In 918 Media, there was a company out or a media company on YouTube called Hedge Post Media, and I just like thought media was such a cool word. I'm like, oh, dude, nobody's using that. Like, everyone's like outdoors, right? Everyone's always been outdoors.
I just added this to my vocabulary last week. Let's use it.
Yeah. And then so we were in the 918, right, in Oklahoma. So we're like 918 Media, and then weirdly enough, our logo was like an elk. Like none of us had ever elk hunted. We're like, dude, it looks so cool.
People don't know, bro.
Yeah. So that was one of them. What else did we try? Were those the only two?
I want to say there was one more.
I think there was. So we started filming in 2017, right? And we put out a few videos. Like Curly was our first video we got on film. Our first bow hunt that we got on film, I think, with the big camera. Yeah, with a big camera. We got to go with a GoPro before. But Through the Peep Outdoors, 918 Media, and then it had been a couple of years, and then in college, like graduating college, I started the podcast. I started Hunter's Advantage podcast, and then we started filming hunts, and then we started doing the podcast together, and then we started doing TikTok, and it's kind of just grown. We've always done some sort of content.
Filmed hunts, though. Like
yes,
for
tried
a
to
hot minute.
Yes, we've always tried to film. So we've always been doing some sort of hunting content like that. Oh, Dead Duck Outdoors was another one that me, Carol, and Jared did. Mm-hmm. So we've tried this 4 or 5 times. HA was just kind of the one that stuck, you know. Don't you think? Was there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Who asked this? Was it
Jess?
Hudson?
No.
Okay, I don't know his profile or anything, but
we messaged quite a bit on Instagram. He's a pretty cool dude. I think he lives in Bartlesville.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But if he's like asking on like getting started filming and stuff, like the first camera I ever owned was a GoPro, and I shot my first bow buck filming it with the GoPro. But when I first started filming, it was like the only reason I want to bring this up because it's a pretty cool story. And it's nothing even deer hunting related. The very first time I decided to like take my GoPro out to like film, and I even I don't know where the video it is. Probably like on some CD-ROM or something at my mom's right now.
Cassette.
Yeah. I had my GoPro, and I was because like I said, like back then we were pretty like head over heels for fishing, and my neighbor had a creek running through his property that we would walk up and down it all the time. Well, it was like during the spring. I remember this because like the grass was like so damn green. And I went out there using my GoPro. I was like, this is the first time I'm ever going to like film me like fishing. And when I say I probably had the best day of like it would have legit been like a really good YouTube video, like to this day, like about fishing, because like I was wearing it and like I had it on my head, and I went down to the honey hole. You know where the honey hole is at, right?
Yep.
Like that little bitty piece. And I basically started all the way back to where like, no, I think I just started at the honey hole, and then I was going to work my way left kind of towards the gar spot. If you still remember that too.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I just went around the bend, and at the time, like we had like 4 dogs. So we had like they were basically all mutts because people just drop them down the dirt road, and we're not mean people. And so we'll try to like take them and like either give them away or not. But a lot of mutts people don't like, especially if they're like older, but my mom for sure like keeps them around. They would follow me out to the creek, and like a lot of times it's bad because like if it gets too hot, they'll like jump in the creek and mess everything up. But this time, like they really didn't. And like they're actually pretty good at like not jumping into the water. Like they usually like stay close, but they'll go off, do their own thing. I don't know what they're doing. But I was fishing at the honey hole one time, and I heard Daisy, which is like a half pit, half lab type thing. Super sweet dog. She's a doll. She's probably like 9 years old now. And she was real. I mean, she wasn't a pup, but she was, up there. And I heard her off like 50 yards away, just start like barking, just tearing into something, barking. And I was like, what the heck? And all of a sudden I heard sound like something was dying. Like it sounded like a dying dog, basically. And I started running over there. I was like, she either like got attacked by a beaver, bit by a snake, like, I don't know, coyote, something. So I dropped everything, started running over there. Everything's on GoPro. I go over there and she's like in the water on this like half submerged, like half laying up on the creek bank log, just absolutely shredding this raccoon.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. And it's all like, it's actually really good footage. And so like, I wanted to see the aftermath because by the time I got there, the raccoon was all dead, like, and tore up. But I was like, I thought that was the coolest thing. Me being that young, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I have this on footage, and like this happens today. Like, this has never happened. Super cool. So I went over there, like, waded through the water, picked up the coon, and I was like, good girl. Like, that's awesome. And went back, and I had a really good day of fishing. I probably caught like 15 out of there. And which is pretty good for like that creek, I think. And
all on film.
I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. We got one more question. I think we get filled. I think you asked me the last one. I get this last one. The last question comes from, gosh, this guy's got a good name. Yee _ boy or BOII.
It's boy. You said it right the first time.
Yeah. He says, best place to find sheds. So I got asked a shed question. It's only fair torture that Jake gets asked a shed question. Where do you find your sheds, Jake?
Typically on the ground, but I mean,
it's like where you catch the fish.
Yeah. Man, I haven't found many sheds, but most of the like the deer sheds I found have been like on like secondary runoffs to like creek systems, kind of, or not even creek systems, just like those little. They're not like, when I say ravine, they're not like super deep ravines, just like little, basically ditches that are in there, and I found them like around the ditch or even in the ditch. That's where I found most of mine at.
Actually,
yeah, like in Oklahoma. Like those little bitty ditches and stuff. Like, I call them ravines, but I mean, it looks like little secondary runoffs of like a dried up creek bed, but it's not, because there's not a creek anywhere around there. But they're like those. That's where I normally find all mine. Like Rattlesnake, you know how like it kind of dips down. Like there's no water running through theirs, but it's like that little bitty ditch ravine type thing. Mm-hmm. Like I probably found 7 in 2021 doing that. Like they were either broken or small, but
there you go. Hey, 7's like, that's probably more than I found like the last like 3 years. So
I've
Jake's the shed guy.
No, I'm not.
Jake's the shed guy from now on. Of our group, of a group of terrible shed hunters, you're probably the best one.
I did find an elk shed.
That's true.
I did find an elk shed, and I was like, "What is this?" I thought it was a big old stick at first, but I was like, "That's too white." It was an elk shed.
Well, that wraps up all of our Q&A for Instagram. Yeah, that's I think that was a good Q&A session. Brought up some good old times about getting shot by a pen gun. Talked about some deer hunting stuff. This is a pretty good episode. We got a few things going on. New YouTube videos are live. Jake just put out a cool video about how rare are Boone and Crockett bucks. We just put out another hunt on late season Kansas. That'll be the last one of the season. So got some new cool content out for you guys.
If you guys got a short attention span, my video's like for you. It's like 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Long. So go check it out.
Exactly. So go check out the video. Make sure to leave us a rating or review on the podcast, Apple, Spotify, all those places. And I will say Google Podcast for the one guy who called me out for that. So Google Podcast, Stitcher, whatever you guys use. As always, thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. Jake's got one more thing.
If you guys are looking, just short and quick, if you guys are looking to upgrade any of your things in your hunting gear this off season, be sure to check out Out on a Limb Manufacturing. They're a really good Oklahoma-based company. Got some super good guys working behind the curtains there. And if you happen to see something you like, be sure you use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout.
That's right. Out on a Limb, folks. some of the best folks in the industry. Go check them out, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Jesus loves you.
Thank you guys so much for checking out the Hunter's Advantage podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to the podcast. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.